Hi everyone, and thanks very much for coming along to this introductory masterclass on getting started with Power BI. I'm Kate and I'm the Programme Manager for the LGA's Data Programme, which is a programme of improvement support that's available to all councils free of charge to help you make best use of data. So we run quite a full programme of support around data and performance management, and I've dropped a link in the chat if you'd like to find out more. I'm delighted to say that there are several hundred people on the call today, which just goes to show the high level of demand for support on Power BI. And so we'll definitely be running more sessions on this theme in the future. Today's session will take you through the process of how Power BI works and how to get started on building a dashboard using council performance data. We're very lucky to have Danny O'Neill here to lead the session. Danny is a research and policy advisor at the City Observatory in Birmingham City Council. He's very experienced with Power BI, and he and his colleagues have been creating some really great dashboards. So Danny's devised a session so that you can download the data he's using and follow along in Power BI. He'll tell you how to do that in a minute. However, we will be recording the session, so if you prefer to just watch and then have a go at the practical steps once you have the recording, that's fine too. The session will move along reasonably fast to show you as much as possible. So especially if you don't have two screens, then watching along might be the best option, but I'll leave it up to you. We'll circulate a link to the data alongside the recording for anyone who wants to have a go at the practical steps afterwards. So Danny's going to present for about an hour, and then we'll have a 20-minute Q&A session at the end. As there's so many people, we'll never get through everyone's questions. So please could you write your questions using the Q&A function rather than raising your hand. And if people could then please vote for questions that they want to know the answers to, then I'll put the most popular ones to Danny. Finally, just to say that we're using live captions to help with accessibility. So you can enable these via the live transcript or the More tab at the bottom of your screen. And that's it from me. Over to you, Danny.
Thank you very much, Kate. I reiterate what Kate said. We're going to move at quite a pace. So if you fall behind, don't worry. Watch the videos back, use the links, and do this in your own pace. Play it back at half speed and follow along. So the first thing I'm going to do today is give you the links you need to download the files. Hopefully, you've already downloaded these files. But if not, I'm going to teach you how to download them from our shiny new observatory. So what you're seeing here is a sneak peek at our new open data soft powered observatory, which is going to be coming online any day now. And what we need to do is we need to get 2 training files and 1 shape file. Now, don't try and open these files yet. Once you've downloaded them, just keep them safe, because if you try and open them, you're probably going to get all sorts of errors depending on how your computer's set up. So in the chat, I'm going to pop a link. We need to go to our platform, click on data, and we're going to search for training. And what you'll find is 2 data sets. So I'm going to pop that chat in here for you all. And if you can't see the chat, use the little button at the bottom of your screen. You should see a button to bring up the chat window and see it side by side. But if you're having trouble, visit City Observatory Birmingham.opendatasoft.com. And once you're there, click on data and just search for training. And you want these 2 data sets, training citizen master and training core data. Click on the little export icon and download those as a CSV or an Excel file. Once you've got those, you're also going to need 1 other link. So back to data and search for boundaries wards. And we want this one, boundaries wards Birmingham. Don't click export yet though. We're going to download this in a very special format that's going to help Power BI later on. So go into there. And you'll see a little yellow dot. When you see a little yellow dot on screen, that's me clicking on something. So it helps you see what you do. And click on here, click on export. And in this one, we've provided the file in a very special format. And you want this one here, the Power BI version. So click download here to download that to your computer. And I'll pop that direct link in the chat as well for those that can see it. So while those are downloading, I'm going to give you a quick run around of what is Power BI. Power BI is the best way to visualize data. It's not a way to show your, it's a way to show your data. It's not a way to create data. That's still going to be done in Excel. But what we're going to do today is we're going to talk you through everything. So if you've never touched Power BI before, if you haven't got a clue what it's doing, don't worry. I'm going to show you everything from launching it to loading in data to then visualizing that data. And if we get time, we're going to sprinkle some fanciness on there as well. So are you ready to plot it like it's hot? I hope so. So Power BI comes in two flavors. You've probably already experienced this. So there's Power BI, the service, a web page where you've probably seen before to consume this data. And you've probably seen something that looks like this. Let me just bring up my screen. So you've probably seen this, where someone sent you a link to a report and you've gone through this report. This is one of our reports where you then get to browse the report and consume it. Now, in the Power BI service, like with all Microsoft stuff, you can sometimes, if you've got access, click on edit and you can create your files. You can create reports in the service. But like with all Microsoft web apps, they are very, very limited. If you do this, you're going to be missing out on a whole load of features. And in fact, most of what we're going to do today, you cannot do in the web version. So to do this, you are going to need Power BI Desktop installed. Speak to your Power BI Desktop is completely free. All of Power BI is free, unless you want to use some of the pro features. But what we're going to do today, we're going to show you what you can do with the free version. If you need to, you might need to speak to your local council's, IT department to get it installed. If you're here from Birmingham, welcome. You need to speak to IT&D to get them to install that. But you can just also try and download it yourself. So what we've got here is a report that's consumed in the service. We're not going to be using that today. We're going to be using Power BI Desktop. So I'm going to minimize this. And we're going to launch Power BI Desktop. I've got it installed here. And the first time you launch this, you're probably going to get a little welcome screen telling you all about the product and clicking here to get data. Just click close, or little icon down the bottom saying don't display this again. And you should get a screen that's similar to this. I say similar because depending on your particular version you've got installed, you may see some slight differences. I've set mine up to be as close to what everyone else sees as possible. But if the colors look a bit different, it's just because I've got the absolute latest version here. I like all the shiny things. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour and talk about this in a minute. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set a couple of settings, which we're going to need to help make this a little bit smoother, but also allow us to use maps, because we're going to show you how to use maps, visualize data. So first thing we do is click up here on File, Options, and Options. Now there's loads in here. You don't need to play with most of this, but we're going to turn on a couple of features. So the first thing is on preview features here under global preview features. And we're going to turn on this top one, shape, map, visual, because we're going to use the shape map to create some lovely chloropleth maps. Those nice filled shape maps. So turn that on if it's not on already. What we're also going to do is click on report settings under current file. And we're going to change this. We're going to turn this one on. Change the default visual interaction from cross-highlighting to cross-filtering. This is going to make your life a lot easier, and the report's going to behave a lot more how you would probably expect it to work. Don't worry about anything else. There's loads of other features, but for now, we're just going to take those, click OK. And just to make sure, we're going to close Power BI. Actually, no, sorry, leave it open for now. So here we are, Power BI. It's a fantastic tool. And if you've used Microsoft stuff before, it's going to be hopefully very familiar. Across the top here, we've got the ribbon. This is where you get all those most common tasks that you're going to perform. You've got your menus, which allow you to change the ribbon. So this is similar to Excel. On the left-hand side, we've got different views. There's the report view, which is where you get to make your pretty visuals and lay it all out. A table view, which for now is very empty because we've got no data in there. But this is where you get to see the data in tabular format, those rows and those columns. And the model view. And today we are going to play with data models because data models are sexy. Now, on the right-hand side, we've got the key panel. So this is where you're going to use to build your visuals. Now here, we've got all these lovely little charts you can build. So here you can see you've got the little graphs. And this is where we're going to add them in. I'm not going to do it just yet. And data is a little flyout panel where we can see all the data we've got loaded. We've also got filters, and there's other ones we can turn on and off now. But if you're using the default settings, this is all you're going to need for today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to load in data. We're going to transform or massage that data to get it to do what we want. And then we're going to create some visuals. And the great thing about these Power BI reports are we're going to use Excel sheets. So let's say these Excel sheets update in the future, and you want to update your report. You don't have to recreate everything we've done. You do once, one time only. And when we hit refresh, it will download all the latest data from your spreadsheets and update your visuals. Because what we're going to do here, we're going to make your life a lot easier. There should be no need for anyone to be creating monthly reports or weekly reports where you're constantly doing the same thing over and over. The great thing about Power BI is all the steps we're going to do, it does in the blink of an eye when you hit refresh. So it's an absolute fantastic time saver. And in the new current economy of local councils, time saving is going to be a valuable commodity. So we need to load up some data. We need to get some data. So the first thing we're going to do today is just click on this Get Data. Most of these ribbon items, you've got this little quick icon. You've got this little down chevron arrow. Clicking that will show you some most common options. But for now, we're just going to click on the main icon here at the top and Get Data. And we're doing this so you can see what data you can load in. So this is the great thing about Power BI. It takes structured data. Structured data are rows and columns. Think spreadsheets. Unstructured data are things like Word documents and PDFs. So we want structured. So we can take data from Excel worksheets, CSVs, Excel, XMLs, JSONs, PDFs. We can load data from SQL. We can load data from around 130 different data sources. And the great thing is, once it's loaded in, it can all work together. So spreadsheets and SQL and all these other data sources you've got dotted around that all don't work together, all of a sudden work as one. And we use it all the time to pull data from LG Inform, one of I would say, the most valuable resource in anything we produce in the City Observatory is LG Inform powered. We can pull it from our own internal services. We can pull a bit from NOMIS. We can pull data from all these different places. And when it comes to you working with it, it just seems like it's one. But for today, we're going to load in 2 files. These files are totally synthetic. One of them is a list of all citizens in Birmingham. Not really, we haven't got 1.14 million records in there, but we'll give you an idea. And the other data file we're going to pull in is a list of all fake phone calls that people make to our contact center. And what the aim is here is to show you how these 2 data sets can work together, even though they're 2 completely separate data sets. And I want you to then start thinking about how you could use this in your own environment. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load in a CSV file. So I'm going to I click on Get Data, and I click on Text CSV and click Connect. What we then need to do is choose those 2 files that you downloaded. I've already got them ready to go. So I'm going to choose this one, Training Call Data. Now, don't get ahead of yourself. You can be very tempted to click this button that says Load because it's nice and green. Don't do that yet. Click on Transform Data, and this is where the magic happens. What that will do is I'll open Power Query. And the great thing is everything I'm about to show you from this point onwards, all of this stuff is available in Excel as well. So all these steps, and I'll talk about what they're going to do. So we're going to load in first file, this training data. And the first thing I want to do is give it a new name. I'm going to call it something else. So I'm going to call this contact center data. Just good practice. So you know what this is. Because by default, it will name it after the spreadsheet. But I need to then make sure that I know what this is when I'm going forwards. Now, the main thing we're going to do here is, if you've worked with Excel, you'll also notice possibly there's no undo button. So I'm about to do a load of things and there's no way to undo what I'm doing. But that's because we're going to be working with this little right-hand box here, applied steps. Think about this. You're doing a report every month, and what do? You take the spreadsheet that someone sends you, you rename columns, you move columns, you convert the file type, you do a bit of maths, and you do the same thing over and over every single month. What applied steps is, it's the robots. This is the system doing those steps for you. And we're going to produce a whole load of steps, a whole sequence of things, and you'll see just how quickly it works. And then the contact center send me the new data. And when I hit refresh, it will do all these steps instantaneously. So this is our first spreadsheet. We now need to do some steps. So you notice that the ribbon's changed. As with all Microsoft things, the ribbon is contextual. So we've now got these new menus. We've got a whole load of new options. And these are all the things we can do. And we're going to do a few of the key items here. I'm not going to go through all the options. We're going to do a few of the key ones. So the first thing we're going to do is check the data type. This little box here that tells you what type of data it is. It's good practice to make sure these are all anything other than ABC123. ABC123 means it has no idea what the file type is. It doesn't know whether it's a number or text. And this is going to help us later on because you can only do math operations on numbers and you can only display certain texts in other boxes. So it's always a good idea to make sure that your data types are correct. And to set those, you simply click on the little corner and choose whether it's a fixed number or text. So that is text, year, We're not going to change that to date yet. It might be tempted to change that to date, but we're not going to do that yet because we haven't actually got a date. We've got a number. So I'm just going to check all these data types and make sure that they are all correct. Now, for the purpose of now, they are all right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to merge. So this might be something you get. You get the data from your supplier, and they've split the day, month, year into a separate column, and you want a date. You want a single date column that you can actually do some work with. So what we're going to do is we're going to merge these. Now, the important thing with merge is it will merge the data in the order you select. So if I select day, then month, then year, it will give me a new column, which is day, month, year. If I choose year, month, day, it will do year, month, day. So using the control key on your keyboard, we're going to hold that down and select day, then month, then year. And now what we're going to do is we're going to click the option at the top under transform for merge columns. Now it's going to say, how do you want to separate this? Well, I want my separator. You can choose one of the defaults, but I want to do a custom one because I want a slash. I want day, month, year with the slashes. I want it to be good old British date time. And then you have to give the column a name. So we're going to call it a nice simple date. Now, look there. We've now got a nice single column with day, month, year as a date. But we're not right yet. It's still got its text. So we're going to click that little icon there and change it to date. Because this is going to be very important. When you're doing date time series, it's very important that Power BI know that it is date and time. And you notice we've got some new steps. And see these steps? This is everything we're doing. And the great thing about these steps are you can move them around. So you can move them up earlier in the chain. You can delete a step. So I can say, well, actually, I don't want to change that to date type. So I can delete that step. Well, I do. So I'm going to put that back on. And it's always good practice to rename these steps. Do not get sloppy and just make the steps, because then someone else will come along, or you'll come along a month later and be like, I have no idea what that step did. So make sure you rename them as you go. So I'm going to right click. When I right click, you see a little blue icon, and rename that to changed data type. I'm going to change this one to say created date column. What I'm also going to do is it's also good practice to get rid of any columns you're not going to use. Try and keep your data footprint as small as possible. It means your data set will be smaller. It'll be easier for you when working with it to just have the columns that you want to work with. But it also means that you're not exposing yourself to more data than you have to. So we're going to remove some columns. So we're going to remove call ID, transaction ID, and call type ID. So I've held down control. You can always do them one at a time. Just click those. I'm going to right click and remove columns. So when you right click on these most things, you get a quick list of the most common things you're going to do. So I'm just going to get rid of these and say yes. Sorry, I'm going to go back to that last step. Now I'm going to do that, because what it does, it can insert steps. You can put steps somewhere else in the queue. I want it to go through this in order. What we're going to also do is we're going to convert this seconds into minutes. So we're going to add a column at the top, and I'm going to add a custom column. And we're going to call this duration. Now in here, you need to put a bit of formula. I don't know these formulas. I don't know the syntax, but good old Google, and even better, ChatGPT knows exactly what to type in. And what we want to do is we want to take the seconds column and convert it into a duration. So I've already looked this up, and I know that I need it to do this bit. And what this is doing, this is saying, use the duration function, convert the seconds column into hours, minutes, and seconds. I'm not going to teach you all the syntax, because what you can do with custom columns is almost unlimited. But think of it like in Excel, where you add a column and you do an equals, because we start with equals. And this is where you can put formulas in. And the formulas you put in here are very similar in their syntax to Excel. So if you know Excel formulas and you know what you want to do, you can Google it and find out exactly how you do it in Power Query. And there we go. We've got a new column that's converted these seconds into hours, minutes, and seconds. And what we're going to do is we're also going to change this data type to duration, because it's a lovely duration data type. And that's going to be very important for later. Rename the step. Now let's have a little look at one of the other functions we can do. So let's right click on this reason for call. And I've got a lot of options in here. But under transform, I can do things like lowercase, uppercase, or in this case, I want to capitalize all the words because someone might have given me the data and they've put some of it through with a lowercase. And the thing about Power BI is, let's say wheelie bins. Wheelie bins with a capital W and a lowercase b is different to wheelie bins all in lowercase, all in uppercase. So when you try doing a count, it will say, I've got wheelie bins with uppercase, I've got wheelie bins with lowercase. They're two different things. So I'm going to account here for human error. That someone's given me this data and not typed it in quite right. So I'm going to capitalize each word. And there we go. We've now tidied up our text. And again, it's created a step. So that's what we're going to do for this particular data file. Let's load in another data file. So we're going to go to new source. And this time I'm going to choose an Excel workbook because this file was given to me in Excel. Depends whether you've downloaded it in CSV or Excel. If you've chosen the default option, it's probably going to be CSV. But if you download it with my instructions, it'll be Excel. And I'm going to load citizen master file. Now, when you load an Excel file, you'll probably see multiple options in here. You might see the sheet with this little white icon. You might see one with blue because that's a table. Because with the Excels, it can actually see the tables within it and the sheets. This is down to you and the data provided, whichever one you choose. In this case, this one's only got a sheet. So I'm just going to choose that. And the sheet has got a nice funny name. So I'm going to rename that to citizens. This is my list of all citizens in fake mini Birmingham. Now, again, we're going to do a merge. We're going to merge first name and last name. So I'm going to do that. Click on transform and merge. And I want to separate it with a space. And we're going to call that full name. So this is a very common one where you get the two separate names that you just want one column. There we go. What I also want to do is they've given me the ward as this. Now, that's no good because I know that when I come to doing mapping, I just need the list of ward names. But what I also want to do is the data may have data for more than just Birmingham. So I want to create a column with the local authority name and a column with the ward name. And thankfully with Power Query, this is super, super simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the column and I'm going to click on split column. And I'm going to say by delimiter. So in the case, the delimiter here is the space. So I'm going to say split this by a space. I'm going to say just do the leftmost delimiter. Just do it once for the very first time you find it. And make sure it's got it down there. Okay, just the leftmost delimiter. That's fine. And okay. Now look at that. We've now got a new column with the ward, with the city name in there. And if I had more than Birmingham in here, you'd see a lot more names in there. But I've also got this lovely dirty brackets in there. I need to get rid of those brackets. Now, the great thing about Power Query and all things Microsoft is there's multiple ways to do things. I could do a find and replace the left bracket, find and replace the right bracket. But we're going to use another option at the top called extract. And I'm going to say between delimiters. Now, here the case, the delimiters are, I want to get rid of give me everything between open bracket and everything between close bracket. There we go. So what we're doing here is we're getting the data ready for us to use. And we also want to get rid of columns again. So I'm going to get rid of email, phone number, and address. I want to anonymize this data. I don't need that. Having that in there is going to present possibly a security risk if this leaks out. I just need the absolute basics. So I'm going to get rid of those and remove those columns. I just need to know who they are. Now, what we've got here is on this one, we've got a citizen ID. And the phone data here has a citizen code. They're the same thing. So in here, it hasn't actually, the contact center data doesn't actually list who the citizen is. They've not given me that for security reasons because they want to be all safe. But they have told me who the citizen was. So citizen number 2 complained about wheelie bins. And again, and again, and again. But I've got a list of all of our citizens. And you may get this all the time where you've got data in 2 different places, but they're somehow related. So in Excel terms, you would normally use a VLOOKUP. Well, we're going to use a data model to do things even better. But there's, again, another way, a merge. But we're not going to do the merge today. We're just going to use a data model to join these 2 data sets together with little bits of string. So here we are. I've now got this data, and I've done all these steps, which has taken us 24 minutes. And we're going to click on close and apply. And this is going to load it all in. And the great thing is, when this data gets updated, I just hit refresh on my report and it will do all these steps. It'll do all these 24 minutes in about 2 seconds. So you can see the sort of time savings we're going to be creating going forwards. So let's close and apply. I'm going to contact the spreadsheets, which can be on your C drive, on a shared drive, on a SharePoint, on a web server, or you can pull it using our amazing API on our Open Datasoft platform to pull this straight into here. I really urge you to have a play with some of our data and the API. It's chef's kiss beautiful.
Danny, can I just quickly jump in and say something? I've had a
Yes.
few messages with people saying that it's going quite fast to follow along, but I'll just reiterate what we said at the start, which is that we're trying to cover, show you quite a lot in the session, and we're going to circulate a full recording and all the data afterwards. So if you're finding it at all hard to follow along in a practical sense, just watch the session, just listen to what Danny's saying, and you can have a go in your own time afterwards at all the practical exercises. All right. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Kate. Absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to follow along with take notes and do the thing and watch, that's 3 things you're trying to do when I'm just doing the one. Main thing for today is to see what you can do and take this away and think if this is something you can see applying in your day-to-day life. Watch the video back at a nice slow speed and take it at your own pace. So we've now loaded that data in, and you'll see this data panel, which we flew out, we can collapse and fly out, has now got those 2 queries in there, or tables. We've got our citizens and our contact center data. Let's have a little look. Let's go to the left and click on this table view to see what's in that data we've loaded in. And look, everything that's gone in. So if you remember Bagpuss, they used to have this wonderful machine where you fed in the ingredients and out comes chocolate biscuits. Well, this is the Bagpuss chocolate biscuit machine. You feed in data with lots of columns and lots of separate columns, and out comes a lovely new column, which we didn't rename, naughty me, and ward. And on this one, we've got that lovely duration. Well, not so lovely. Let's fix that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to click on this column, and we're going to change it from a decimal number to time. I'm going to say, yes, I want to change that format. And I want to set the format. So anything you can set the format of these columns. So I want to set this one to hours, minutes, and seconds. There we go. So this is 65 seconds, which is actually 1 minute, 5 seconds. And it's going to be very important because call center data, you need to know how long your calls are taking. So we can have a little look in here to see what's in the columns. And this is good to familiarize yourself, especially if you're making your visuals. You need to figure out, well, which column do I need? In this case, I now know that I need to choose ward 2 when I'm using my ward because I didn't rename the column. I can go back and add that step in there, but I won't do that for now. What we're going to do is let's have a look at the model view here. This is where you get to see, I'm going to move this around, how this data is linked together. It's automatically created a relationship, which is really, really smart. It's automatically seen, I can hover, that it knows the citizen ID is somehow linked to citizen code. Now, you can create these relationships manually by literally just clicking on the value and dragging it to the other one. But we're going to go with the default. I like what it's done. It's made this lovely little pipe. And what that means is when I pull data from our contact center data and build a visual based on this, I can enrich it with anything in the citizen data. So although in here, it doesn't have the citizen's name or where they're located, it's gone, hello, citizen 2. Who are you in this table? And it goes to this table and says, well, citizen 2 is this person who lives here and with all these details. So it allows us to enrich the data with another data set. Let's visualize how that's going to look. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to add a chart. So let's click on this one. So in here, you've got all these different charts, all these different columns. This is where it starts getting really, really, really easy. Now, if in Excel, you know that you have to do a pivot table, then you have to do a pivot chart. Well, what we're going to do here is we're just going to say, I want a column chart. I'm going to put that here, make it how I want it to look. And under contact center data, I'm going to drag the date. I want the date on the x-axis along the bottom. But I now need to say what's going to make up the y. What number's going to determine the value? For now, I'm just going to drag date onto the y. Count of date. There we go. And we can see how many calls we had in 2022 and how many we had in 2023. What we now need to do is click these little icons up here. In here, we can now dive into the data. The data is loaded in at year, at day, month, quarter, and year level. So I actually don't want quarters. I'm going to just delete that one off. But what I do want to do, I want to start seeing the months. So I'm going to click on this one. I want to dive into the data. So I'm going to click on that to drill into the data. And there we go. We can now see how many calls we had by month. If I clicked it again, we could see it at day level. I can use these arrows to go up in the hierarchy and down again. So this gives the viewer the ability to see the data in a way that suits them. Some people may just want to see the years. Others may want the granular day-by-day view. But for now, we just want the simple one. And we want to do another one. We're going to add another chart for the agent. So we're going to put in there the agent ID on the X, who is the agent. And we're going to drop the agent ID again on the Y. So we can see how many calls each person took. I'm just going to minimize this view so it makes the page a bit bigger. Now, I've done this and thought, actually, I don't want a column chart. I want a bar chart. Instead of recreating things, I've selected the chart. I can now click on here and change the chart. At any time, you can click on a visual and click on a new one. I can switch between any visual and just change it at whim. So now I've got my lovely column chart, stacked bar chart there. Now, I want to add a bit more information to this chart. So on the left, we're building a visual. In here is where we put the X, the Y, and we can drop things into the legend. So I'm going to drop the reason for the call into the legend. And now we can see, out of all those calls, how many were for potholes, quite a few, and how many were for parks, for wheelie bins, the light pink. So we've added a bit more information to that data, or you can take it out. What we also want to do is, when we hover over there, you can see the information, what we call the tooltip. So what's the reason for the call? What's the count of date? Well, count of date doesn't make much sense. So I can double click on here and change this to say number of calls. So now when I hover over there and get the finer detail, it now says number of calls. Let's add a little bit of spice to this chart. You've got a couple of icons at the top here. We're going to click on this one to format the visual. This is where you can set the names of axis. You can change titles along the X. You can change the title from auto to date. See down there it changed. You can change the Y, what the title is there. You can change the formatting, fonts, colors, all that sort of good stuff. But what we want to do is we want to turn this one on. Data labels. We're going to turn that on. And look, we get these lovely numbers telling us what the values are. Well, actually, I just want to turn that one off. I want total labels on. I want to see how many calls we had in total. So we can see in January, we had 5.25 thousand. And under the options here, you can format it again, change the fonts, display units. I can change that to none. So it gets rid of the point. I can change that to millions. How many millions of calls or thousands? Well, I want none. And I'm going to say it's got no decimal places because it hasn't. So none. There we go. So we've added that lovely little total count, which I know is a really important one for people. We did the same for this one. So again, we're going to click on that visual, format, data labels. We're going to turn those on. And I'm going to format that again to say display units none, decimal places none. Now, what we can also do here is let's try and talk about a bit about data storytelling. We've shown here the pure values, how many phone calls we had in each month. But let's change the graph on this one here on your first button to the 100% stacked. I love these graphs. These are a great way to tell a different story because at that moment you're thinking, yeah, we have some months it was quieter, but overall it looks the same. Well, not when we go 100% stacked. We see suddenly in July and August, we get a lot more calls for building permits and a lot less calls for wheelie bins, which is totally untrue because wheelie bins, as we all know, is always up there. So this is another way of telling data story, but it's a great way. This is why how I build my visuals. I tend to flick between the different graphs to see which one makes me go, oh, that's interesting. Because when you have that reaction, you know you're telling a good data story. But for now, I'll leave it as that one. Let's add a little table. Let's add a table visual. And in here, I'm going to actually now take data from the citizens. I'm going to take the ward name, which was this one, and drop that in there. And I want to see how many phone calls we had for each of those. But for that, I need to take the data from, not here, but from here. So I'm going to just drop in there agent ID. I'm going to drop that in there as well. And make sure I then change this. I'm going to right click and change it to account. So there we go. I can now see how many phone calls we have in each of our wards. In total, just under 100,000. And the reason I've done it from there is because I want the ward name from, let's have a look at table view. I want the ward name from here. I want this list of wards, but I want the amount of phone calls from this one. And because we've got this lovely data model pipe linking the two together, I know that the data from here is being fed into here. But I know also I want the data to flow both ways. It literally is like flowing water. The data from here can flow into this bucket. But at the moment, anything I do with this bucket isn't going to flow back to this one. So I'm going to click on the little pipe and change the valve from being a single direction to both directions and apply. Now, anything we do with either or can flow back to either or. Let's have a little look. Let's also add in another visual, one more visual. We're going to add in a slicer. Slicer is a way of selecting. So I'm going to add the slicer in and drop on there the date. So I can now choose what I want to see, the dates. How cool is that? Or a little calendar there as well. Top design tip is try and keep your slices near the top left. We're in the Western world, we read left from right, top to bottom. So it helps if you want someone to see something important, put it in the top left. So I'm going to resize some of this, and I'm going to put my date slice in the top left because I want them to pay attention to that before they start messing with anything else. This is where Power BI becomes really, really magical. We've not done anything other than put this data on there and let it automatically link it together. All of these visuals all talk to each other. Let's say I just want to see what phone calls we had in Spark Hill. I can click on that in our table, and now it will show me how many phone calls we had in Spark Hill by month and for who. Let's also add another chart in, very quick one, for the reason for call. Let's drop that in there on the Y and drop that in again on the X axis. So I can see how many phone calls we had. And I can switch between each ward and see who's done what. I can click on the agent and see how many phone calls they've taken for each ward. I can click on a month and see what phone calls and who's done what in that ward. They all are linking there. This is a great way to be able to tell that story and give people that interaction. So I can see, for example, I can click on wheelie bins and see if I sort this by that. I can even sort and see which wards are more popular for potholes, wheelie bins, noise complaints, water and sewer. All without setting anything up. This is all default. It automatically creates this link between the data sets. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to add a map because it's all well and good seeing this information and seeing which wards are doing the most. But let's add a map. So hopefully you've enabled that shape map visual. If you're not seeing this little icon here, we want this one here, the empty one, not this one, not a filled map. Although what we're putting in looks like a filled map, it's not. It's a shape map. If you don't see that, you're going to need to save and reopen Power BI after you turn that option on. So I'm just going to do a good bit of practice. I'm going to File, Save As, and let's put this somewhere. I'm just going to put this on my folder and call it Day 1. So I've already got that there. For some of you, you're going to do that, close and reopen your Power BI, and then that icon will appear because you've turned that setting on in the preview features. So let's add a shape map. So I'm going to click on that one here. Make it how I want it to look. And we now need to give it some information. We need to tell it a few things. We need to tell it where I want it to map, how many are in that little shape, and I also need to tell it what that shape looks like, because it doesn't know what Birmingham looks like. So the first thing is location. The location we're going to take from that citizens data. We're going to take the ward, and I drop that in location. I now need to tell it how many people were in that ward. So we've already done that by this one. We've already done that in here by dropping in there the count. So I'm going to drop in there the count in the color saturation. Make sure it says count of. If it doesn't, right click, make sure you change to count, not count distinct. I'm not covering that today. But as you can see, let's make that a bit bigger. That doesn't look very Birmingham-y. As big as we are not that big. What we now need to do is tell it what Birmingham looks like. And that's that third file that you downloaded. That's your shape map file. Now, your geospatial team and your council will be able to help you with those. For Birmingham City Council, we have a geospatial team who hold all those and can provide them. We also have them on our City Observatory ready to download as well at all different levels, MSOA, LSOA wards. We've got loads of them. But you all downloaded that Birmingham ward one earlier. So we're going to use that. So the next thing is to click on Format Your Visual. And under Map Settings, we're going to tell it what the map is. It comes with some pre-built ones, but we're not using this geography at all. You've noticed Birmingham wards isn't in there. So we're going to say custom. And then you need to download your shape file. Today, we're not creating shape files. I'm not going to teach you how to make your own, because you can. We're going to use the one that I've already provided. So we're going to click on Browse and choose that file that you downloaded, which will probably be in your Downloads folder. But for here, I've got mine in another folder. And there we go. We've now got, so that file that you downloaded, and if some of you opened it up, it looked like a load of gobbledygook. It's actually a load of polygon geo coordinates. That's what Power BI needed. So we're now telling them, this is what Birmingham looks like. This is what this ward looks like. And that data we've got tells it which ward to put the data to put it into. So now we can see, I can click on Ladywood, and that automatic cross filtering has shown me where Ladywood is. So now when I actually want to select my data, I can either choose it from the table here. I'm going to get rid of this table. I don't want that. I want the map bigger, bolder. There we go. I can now click on a ward and I say, why is that so high? I want to see what Sutton are getting. I can see they're getting wheelie bin problems. I can click on any of these. I can see where do all of our pothole problems occur. So we can see where we get the most reports. Where do we have wheelie bin problems? And you can see how the color saturation moves around. This is all only possible with interactive maps, because can you imagine making a PowerPoint deck with showing a map with that and that and that and that, but by different agents and by different months? It'd be a huge report, a boring report. But by making this interactive, you give the viewer the ability to see the data how they want to see. So I can now switch between here. And again, don't feel overwhelmed. There is nothing you need to do to make this all talk to each other. It just does it because it's coming from the same spreadsheets, and behind the scenes, we've got this data all linked up. Let's add some polish. If you know me, you know that I like to be Mr. Fancy Pants. Let's make this report look a little bit more reporty. So we're going to move it all around. And moving this around is just like Excel, sorry, just like PowerPoint or Word. You click on the item and you've got your little handles here to move them around. At the top, we've got some other items. We've got insert, and we can insert shapes and a text box. So let's insert a shape. Let's insert a little rectangle here at the top. Let's make it under style. Let's make it purple, because we love our purples in Birmingham. And I'm going to add a text box. This is my report, which I want over there. And just like PowerPoint, this is no different. You highlight it. We'll change the font size. We'll make the font white. But we'll also change effects over here on the right. We'll change effects and turn off the background to make it transparent. There we go. Let's make that a bit more laid out. And what we're going to do is I'm going to insert an image. Let's click on image. I'm going to choose our logo, which I've got ready saved. And let's put that up there. Look at that. Now we've got a lovely branded report with titles. And you've got other options. You've got all these different shapes, text box, buttons, all these items you can add in. So there is the basics of our report. We loaded the data, we transformed it, renamed some columns, we built visuals, and they magically, automatically started talking to each other without you having to do anything with it. We added some nice little visual elements. And what's happened now is our data center probably sent me some new call center data. I've put it in the same folder that you downloaded it to and said when Windows said, do you want to overwrite? I said, yes, overwrite. And you want to now make all this update and do all that stuff. So how long has that taken us? 46 minutes to transform and visualize the data. So now you get the new call center data and you've saved it onto wherever you want to save it. I just hit refresh. It goes off, pulls down that data, does all those steps automatically, and our report is bang up to date. And in fact, after I hit publish, which does need a pro license, once you publish this to your workspace, you can actually have that do it for you. We're not going to cover workspace and refreshing today. We're just going to do the basics of creating a report because I can now have this and run this entirely on my computer. I don't need a pro license. I don't need Microsoft Fabric. I don't need any of that fancy stuff. I just need free Power BI and a few Excel spreadsheets to do all of this and have it automatically update as well. So hopefully you can see the value of having it do all those automatic refreshes as well. Now, I know that was a lot to cover in such a short space of time, but the whole point of this is that you do watch it back. I don't expect anyone to follow along unless you're working with multiple screens here and you can listen at quite a high speed. I do expect you to watch it back. And I'm then happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Danny. That was a really really comprehensive run through of what people need to do when they're getting started on Power BI. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. We've had lots of questions come in. So yeah, we're going to have about a 25-minute Q&A session now. As I mentioned earlier, please just write your questions in the Q&A rather than raising your hand, just because we've got so many people on the call. And then if people could please continue to vote for the questions that they most want to know the answers to, then I'll put the most popular ones to Danny. Just to say, as we do have so many people on the call, we won't be able to get to everyone's questions, but given the popularity of this webinar, we'll be planning a series of future events on Power BI, and we'll use the questions that you submitted as a guide to what future events should cover. Equally, if you know the answer to someone else's question, feel free to reply to them in the chat. So I will just have a look at see which are the most popular questions here. So Danny, the first question, with the free version of Power BI, are there limitations on your ability to publish and share BI reports with non-users and other stakeholders?
Yes, so if you want to share with them and you're only completely and utterly on free, they will also need Power BI installed and you'll have to send on that PBIX file. If you want, the easiest way to share it is if you do have a pro license or if you have premium capacity, speak to IT. I don't cover licensing. Your IT department will handle all that. But hopefully you do have somewhere that you can publish your data to, and that makes sharing it so much easier. But hopefully when people see the value of these reports and see the time saving, they will appreciate the cost savings that will come.
Great, thank you. And Stuart is asking, Power BI's built-in date intelligence only seems to support calendar years. Is there an easy way to group data into a financial year hierarchy?
Yes.
April to March instead of January to December.
Yes. So whenever we start working our City Observatory, we have a template. This template basically is like a little toolkit of all the things you need to do your job. One of the things in there is what's called a date table. I can try and find the link for this and send it to Kate to send out in the pack afterwards. But a date table, as you can see from this one, has the date, which we know, but then converts it into its various components. It's year, it's financial year, it's quarter. It breaks it down into all the ways that you would want it. It tells you what days are weekday, week, month. So I'm actually going to just take this. In fact, I can probably send this, I can make this available. I can send this to everyone. So you can have this date table. I'm going to put this query in here because you can copy and paste queries between your various reports. It's cheating, really. So let's have a look. Our contact center data. So here we've got our date table with a date and its financial year. I'm going to do a merge. Think of this as a VLOOKUP. So I'm going to say merge queries. And what I want to do is I want it to take the date that's in the call center data, and I want it to look at my date table and look at the date in there. If you're doing a VLOOKUP, you've got to figure out all the syntax for this. Well, I've just told it these two things are linked. And what it's done now is it's enriched my contact center data with everything from my date table, which I don't want. So I'm going to click these little outwards icons. And I just want to say, just give me the financial quarter, financial year, fiscal year, fiscal period, fiscal week, fiscal year. Let's get all the fiscal data. So now we've converted that date into its various financial year components. And then when you plot your graph, you can use that column instead of the date column. I'll send this template out, or I'll send a version of it. So you can copy and paste this into yours. But another way to do merges are fantastic. It's a great way to join data together if you don't want to use the data model view. So let's take contact center. I could do merge. And I could merge it with the citizens data. I could choose the citizen code and citizen ID, because remember they've joined. Do the merge. And then say, well, I just want to pull back. I just want to enrich my contact center data with just the citizen's ward name. And it'll pull that information back from that lookup. There we go. So I've now got one spreadsheet, which was two. So it's a way of joining together VLOOKUP style. Next question, Kate. What have we got?
Thank you, Danny. Next question. Can Power BI be linked into other apps or software? And this person's saying that they use iTrent for their HR data, for example. And can they use information from using? Can they pull information for using in Power BI? I'll also just jump in there and ask and say that some people have also been asking about pulling in data from LG Inform. And whether that's possible. And for people who don't know, LG Inform is the LGA's free data benchmarking tool that we provide for councils. I'll put a link to it in the chat, but Danny, if you could possibly say a little bit about that, please.
Well, let's have a look. So when I click on get data, I just had a quick look then. Trend or iTrend wasn't in there. But most packages these days, so if you're using HR and occupational health, you might be using something called Covity. And I know Covity uses the OData standard web feed. So a lot of these packages use OData as a way to present their data. A lot of our data, we have internal systems called Northgate and all these other ones, but they store their data in a database somewhere. And that database might be SQL or DB2. Those sort of things we do have. So OData, if your HR package uses an OData feed, that's here. If it uses SQL, we've got all the different SQLs available in here. So speechwriter department, find out what the database format is in and if it exists. And often when you want to get into these things, they just need to know what's the server name, what's the username, password, and a few other bits of context information, and it will pull all that lovely data in. I know for a fact that Covity and other HR systems do work really, really well with Power BI, because my wife, who's a Power BI developer, does that as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Danny. And someone is asking, are there any ways to share interactive reports with other users other than paying for the pro license or premium per user option? And sort of related to that, how does Birmingham sort of finance or use Power BI, and has it proved value for money?
So if you don't want to invest any money, everyone who you want to share this report with will need Power BI installed on their computer, the free version. If you want to share easily. So if I want to publish this for my boss, because we have Microsoft Fabric, we have a premium capacity, lots of premium capacity, I would click on publish and I choose a workspace. Think of it like a Teams site. So then when I want to share it around with people, we've got I've got access to all these lovely workspaces for different things, and it will be in there as a report. That's the easiest way to do it. Or you can, if you've got a pro license, you can publish it to my workspace and you can share it from there. So here's all the reports I have in my workspace, and I can easily click on the share icon there and share it with other people. But they would also, I believe, I'm not the licensing expert. I'm not IT. I'm a regular Bob. I believe they also need a pro license to consume it, unless I publish it to a workspace with a little diamond, in which case, effectively, IT have foot in the bill for me sharing that. We also publish things and share them publicly externally. So when you go to the City Observatory, click on publications, we've got things like our area and ward profiles. You can go in there, and that will take you to our Power BI dashboard. This is a Power BI dashboard we published fully publicly, and anyone can access it. But there is a cost involved, and our IT foot the bill for that. They've not asked for more money yet, so I think we're doing okay in terms of quantity. But yes, there are multiple ways to share it. But if you're not wanting to spend any money, everyone has to have Power BI installed, and you've got to share the file, put it on a shared folder, put it on a SharePoint, email it around. It's not ideal, but it is still a better way than doing reports entirely manually.
Thanks, Danny. And just going back to the previous question, people are asking, I don't know if this is something you'd be able to do now. Could you do like a very quick 5-minute of how one would, or where one would look on LG Inform?
Oh, yes.
To get the API, to feed through. And not a whole, we are going to probably run a full session on this, but this is just to kind of, if you could just point people in the right direction.
I will show you the basics to get you going. LG Inform is an API. APIs are magic when you understand them. And the great thing about LG Inform is their API is super simple to use. So I would find the metric I want. You build your report. So you might have, if you've used LG Inform, you might have used the report builder. So let's find a metric. Percentage of, let's find something. Percentage aged 10 to 4. You add your area, Birmingham, and I can choose whatever you've got in there. So often the data is in ward level, which is utterly fantastic. But let's choose Birmingham. We'll have latest period. You can add in multiple periods, and you get the data. Now, normally, you'd go to download, and you'd click on, you'd get the spreadsheet. You'd just download the CSV file. Well, here's a little tip. Right-click on that CSV of this data, copy link, head into your Power BI, get data, but this time I'm going to choose web. And I literally just paste that in there. Make sure I've got the right file. It's going to load up. Nope, got the wrong structure. We do need a full session on it. I can't remember which one it is. I write the API strings from scratch and pull them in that way. But yes, it's literally you build a query and you paste it in and you do get as web in Power BI. And then when LG Inform update the data, so LG Inform pull in all this data from everywhere. And when they update their data, you don't do that. You just click refresh and it will go off to their servers and pull down the latest data. We use those strings all the time on our City Observatory platform. So in here, we've got a lot of data on economy, things like this. And this pulls it in via API from LG Inform every month automatically onto our observatory. And we do the exact same thing when we pull it into Power BI. It's a session in itself, but it's an absolutely invaluable tool in our toolkit.
Brilliant. Thanks, Danny. And yeah, as Danny said, we definitely will run a session on this, and we'll circulate various links to various resources when we send the recording around, including LG Inform and LG Inform Plus. So we'll move on to the next thing. Thanks, Danny. I know it's tough having lots of questions fired at you, but there's so many things that people want to know. So Simon is asking, what further Power BI learning resources or tools or forums would you recommend for someone trying to become proficient? Well, before you answer that, in terms of forums, I'm going to post a couple of links in the chat whilst Danny's answering this question. So we have 2 Knowledge Hub groups which are free to sign up to, and there's one in particular which is the Power BI Users Knowledge Hub group. Which is a very active group, and councillors are helping each other with their issues. So I'm going to post those links in the chat now whilst Danny gives any thoughts he's got about other learning resources or tools.
I learned how to use Power BI in 1 day initially from YouTube. YouTube, if you think you have a question, just look for it on YouTube. You'll find a dozen videos guiding you through that you can watch at a nice slow pace to learn. A lot of people in the councils, Birmingham, if anyone here is from Birmingham, we all have access to the Microsoft Enterprise Skills Initiative. A lot of people might have this. I didn't know we have been there 4 years. I've only just found out that we have this. I'll pop it in the chat. Log on with your standard council log on, and you may have access to this. And here they have all these different learning paths, including not just webinars. These are classroom-led training, one-to-one training. They have a lot of items, and depending on your council's package, you may have access to a lot of resources. Microsoft have a lot of free training. They are not keeping this behind a paywall. You can do the entire course to become certified in Power BI for free. You have to pay for the exam, but you can do the course, self-paced learning, lots of interactive hands-on labs. Even if you don't have Power BI installed, they give you a virtual machine through a web browser where you can actually load Power BI and do the workshops that they give you. Absolutely fantastic resource. And Google. Google not Bing. Bing's not the greatest for answering your questions. But if you think, how do I do this? There'll be someone that's done it. You're not the first person to ask the question. Anything you can think of, someone's already answered the question in absolutely great depth, and it's all on Google.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, now someone is asking, how can we make our dashboards data secure for publishing on our website while still being live and interactive?
Very good question. So City Observatory, everything we do, we always ask the question, can we publish it publicly? So you saw that data we loaded in when we went to transform. So I'm going to click on this button here. This is how you get back into Power Query. In fact, remember these steps, this Power Query, it's all in Excel. And I'll show you in a moment how to get to that. This goes through something called the mashup engine. So we loaded in, if we have a look at the citizens, and I'm going to look at the previous steps. So let's go back. I can see what the data looks like at a previous step. Now, remember, we had their phone numbers and their email and their everything else. And you don't want anyone seeing that. That's another reason why we remove it. So once you hit that close and apply, the source data goes into the mashup engine, chocolate biscuit machine makes the biscuits and spits out what you've told it to spit out. That source data is not accessible to anyone else other than the developer who's got the PBIX file. To share it securely, you have to publish it to your premium capacity workspace, those ones with that little diamond. And then you have the option. So this one I can share. Let's find one that I can make public. This is a tool, as it happens, that loads in all the finance performance data for every single local authority. Every one of you in this meeting, all of your data is in here, thanks to LG Inform. And this one's nice and public data, so it's not risky. So I can see how we compare to any one of you. I publish this publicly, and then I click up here, embed report, and publish to public web. And that will give you a very special link that then allows you to share it around. And like we've done on our website, we can embed it on our website. It gives you a whole load of caveats and things. The main thing is make sure that your data model is safe. Make sure everything that's identifiable is not in there. Do not put anything identifiable in there. If you've got individual row level data, try and group it up and aggregate it. Take every mitigation you can to avoid. Just assume someone is somehow going to extract the data from it. So try and make sure that what comes out in your table view here. So when I'm in my report, when I'm in this table view, make sure, my rule is make sure there's nothing in here that you do not want people to see. There are things you can do in the settings. So in the settings, you can disable the ability to export data. So you've got export data. You can say, don't allow them to export data. You can turn off visuals because you think I've got a nice secure report, and you'll realize that someone can click on a visual. And then when it's published, they can click on here and see the individual. So whereas I'm just seeing January, February, if I used maybe their full name as the count, it has the potential to see the full name. So there's lots that you do. I'm not going to cover all the detail, but you would use things like measures to create these aggregations. Measures are a way of doing sums and other complex things to hide as much data as you can. There's a lot that you can do. There's a lot of resources out there that will tell you how to secure your reports. But typically, once you've published it via web, they do not have access to that back-end data. They can just see what you show here. So it's all about making sure that what you show here in the filters, which you can turn off, And in your visuals, only shows what you want them to see. But we always try and remove that risk anyway.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I've had a couple of questions about accessibility. So, for example, Catherine's saying that she's particularly interested in any considerations or information relevant to digital accessibility in Power BI. And she's saying that they've been following Microsoft best practice guidance, and they're in the process of developing their own, which takes into account a wider scope of accommodations. But do you have any tips or tricks or standards that you'd be willing to share?
Yes, I'm going to open up, while I'm talking, I'm going to open up a report. So if you Google Power BI accessibility, then Microsoft will give you a whole page about how they try and accommodate accessibility as best they can. Let me find a good report. There's lots when you publish it. So after you've published it to the workspace, bear with me, the title bar comes up. After you publish it to the workspace, you've got an option here. You can change to high contrast colors. You can simulate what your report would look like in an environment where they potentially don't have great accessibility. So let's have a look. This one I know has been through the entire ringer when it comes to accessibility. So you'll see that on that previous chart, we had shapes. We had not just the dots to show you this is the value, we had shapes. We use, in this one, we use a load of measures so that when we have the information down here, it gives you a narrative, and this is real time. So as I change ward, we give a text explanation, because by its nature, we are dealing with visuals. If someone's visually impaired, it's very difficult to visualize data. So we actually provide a text explanation that is fully dynamic based on what they choose. Windows has some amazing accessibility options in there. If I turn on the accessibility reader, I can point to anything in here and it will read out what's there. It will read out the values. In Power BI, you can also set you can also set the tab order. So when I hit tab on my keyboard on this one, it moves through the logical order, how you expect things to work. So that if you have a screen reader, it can read it out to you. There's loads it can do, but it is not 100% perfect. It does have its flaws. For example, maps like this, I can hover over things and it will read out what's in there. So you have to make sure that what you have in your text isn't over the top. In Power BI, I'm going to minimize that. You can click on view. Click on selection. Now here is where you get to change. So here we've got layer order. So these things, they're layers, like old style cell animation. You can move the orders around because you might want this one. If I move that over there, it's over the top of that visual. Well, I can move that particular visual lower down in the hierarchy, and it's now under. But also you've got this tab order. Here you can set what order things move in when you hit the tab key. So you can set the visual order, so it visually looks nice, but you can also set the tab order. So when I hit tab, it moves through them in order, because at that moment you can see it jumps around all over the place because that's the order that they're going in. So with this, you can move them around and move it into its logical order. So all of our public reports, we put through this, we make sure the order's correct. We try and put text explanations where we can. When it comes to images, we have alt text. So this image here, if I click on that, under general, there's alt text. I could put a text description in there so any screen readers know what that image is. You can also disable things to say, well, I don't need that to be read out by a text reader. I don't need the purple bar to be read out by a text reader. I'm just going to disable that when it comes to tab order. They don't need to select that. It's purely there, purely cosmetic. There's loads you can do. Again, loads of YouTube stuff telling you what options you have.
Okay, Danny. Sarah is saying, as a beginner, she's interested in knowing how long it's taken you to get this competent at Power BI. So I know you said you learnt the basics in a day. How long have you been doing it for, and how much? I think this is like a more general question. I think that when I'm working on sort of general data support for councils is kind of raising awareness with more like senior leadership of actually how long it does take to kind of get the skills, get the skills needed to properly do some of this stuff. So how much time would you say you've invested in sort of developing these skills?
I'm quite an exception. I would say to work with Power BI, you do need to have some level of technical competence. You need to understand the basics. You need to understand formulas. You need to know that when you type equals sum, you can do a bit of maths. If you don't understand that and you can't grasp that, you may struggle with some of the more advanced stuff. For creating the basics here, hopefully you've seen how easy it is to literally load the data in and do, I want this on the X and I want that on the Y. I watched a YouTube video for 15 minutes and I was creating a visual like this within a moment immediately afterwards. And then as you do, you just start working through it. Within about a month, I created our first product, which is on the observatory, the census product. So if you have a look at our City Observatory, publications, census. This is a product I made after 1 month of working intensely with Power BI. I was fortunate when I joined the department, they had nothing else to give me. So I was able to just figure this out. And this takes all of the ONS data and visualizes it in this lovely little report. But thankfully, every data set was separate, so there was no interaction. So that kind of made it easier. It gave me good introduction to data models. And then as you start, hopefully, creativity is a major factor in all this. You think it's not about doing what you know, because you don't know anything about Power BI. It's about thinking, I want to get there. You have no idea how to get there, but you know where you want to go to. So you Google it and you ask around, and I'm more than happy to answer questions as well. And then you figure out how to get there and you build your skills. So don't try and work within your knowledge constraints. Just think about where you want to be and then Google it. And you'll find the video telling you exactly what to do. If you have a look at my little links here, my knowledge searches, this is everything I've thought about. I want to do this. And I'm going to bookmark it so I can get to it next time when I want to do it. Mostly YouTube videos and knowledge-based articles. So I would say after about a week of building reports, you'll be able to produce something far superior to what you're doing in Excel. After a month, you're never going to want to look back. You'll start to find out all the little tweaks and all the nuances. I've been doing this now for 1.5 years. And here I am telling you how to do it.
Excellent, thank you. I've got now just a few more slightly more specific questions. So someone is asking, it says Power BI uses latitude and longitude for mapping. I've just lost it. Have you found an easy and accurate way of transforming eastings and northings to latitude and longitude? I don't know if that's a question you can answer.
So you saw us, we built that map. We didn't use any latitude or longitude at all. We just used the ward names because that shape file, which we're matching it with. So those things have to match up. The names in this ward column have to match what's in my shapefile. And because they do, I can map it. So if you've not used the shapefile, if you're using things like Azure Maps and these other ones, yes, you may need latitude and longitude. The ONS Open Geography Portal and our City Observatory if you're Birmingham. So the Open Geography Portal, I'll give you the link, has all the data that you need in the boundaries. So we have a load of data sets internally that convert wards into latitude and longitude. In here, if you find a particular one, so electoral boundaries, wards and divisions, you'd find the data set that you want. You'd filter it to the area that you want. Sadly, Birmingham's got 69 wards. It takes a while to filter manually. So you would filter. I'm not going to show you how to do this. I'm just going to give you an idea. So you'd filter it to the area you want. And when you download it, it will give you the ward code, ward name, which is what I needed, but also the latitude and longitude. So internally here, we have a load of data flows that we've created, which present our geographies at all different levels and give you all the information you need, depending on what your tools. So if you're using Power BI and shapefiles, you're going to need the ward names. We also use Mapbox. And I've got a session coming up with the ONS soon where we talk about how to use Mapbox. Mapbox needs those longitude and latitudes. That is a hugely powerful, and again, another free tool. And I absolutely adore Mapbox and Power BI. The two work together beautifully to create some really detailed maps.
Thanks, Danny. You mentioned the session that you're doing with ONS Local. And we're also going to be doing some sessions with ONS Local, and I'll be posting about those to everybody, letting people know about that. Those sessions coming up. So definitely keep an eye out for those. And a couple more questions here, Danny. So someone is asking, can you tell us a bit more about automatically updating the data sources? Do you just need to use the same file name and save it to the same folder?
If that's how you set up, the best thing about Microsoft is you don't have to do things one way. There's 12 different ways you can do it. You can do it using click, click, click. I've seen people do things using pure code. It's about working in a way that suits you. So here's one of the products I showed you, our area and ward profiles. Someone I also saw is asking, can I be more than 2 sets of data? Absolutely. There are limits. I don't know what they are. I've not hit them yet. This particular one loads in around 120 million rows of data. This is our area and world profiles, where we take lots of data from different places: housing information, education, NOMIS, LG Inform data. So you can see here's all the queries we load in. Here's the data model that powers this lovely beast. Look at all these pipes. May look complex, but they're just pipes. It's just saying this data flows from here to there.
Excellent.
And behind the scenes, there's a lot more. What was the original question? Sorry, I got diverted onto the multiple data sets one. What was that?
Oh, I'm not sure. I've dismissed it, but I think if you feel your question wasn't answered there, please can you repost it? Because sorry. But I'll move on to the next one, which is would you be able to undo a unique applied step without undoing everything else you've done?
Yes. And I remember the previous question as well. So the previous question was around what do you do about updating? So all of these update in different ways. I've got some that are census and static. Don't need to update those. I group these up so I know what to do later on. I've got ones where I say that they're LG Inform, so I know that those, I don't do anything. These LG Inform ones, the source is this URL. It just pulls that from there. So when I hit refresh, and some of them are static files. So yes, those static files, if I want them to update, I put them in the exact same place and just hit refresh. If you don't, you've got to go into your steps, click on the previous step and change it in here. So if you change the file name from cool data 1 to cool data 2, I've got to go into here. So you want to avoid that. You want to build a data architecture that means you don't have to do all these steps. You just leave it each time. So I always save them to a SharePoint and replace what's there. When it comes to, you can also tell it to load everything that's in a folder. So we have a folder full of financial procurement data, and every month procurement put in a new file. Well, one of the steps here is you can say new source. One of those options is a folder, and I just say it just pulls everything in the folder. So as I add a new month, it just loads it in, as long as it's in the same format and the same columns. The one about steps, yes, this is all the steps that happens to this one. So we take universal credit data from LG Inform, and then these are the steps it goes through until we get to the lovely clean data at the end. You can delete any of these steps, but it may have a knock-on effect. I can rename them. I can also reorder them. So remember I said there's no undo button because you're not undoing what you've done. You just want to get rid of the step. I could click here and say, well, now I actually want to rename that column. And if I did, see, it's going to ask me, do you want to insert a step? So I've added a new step in there where I rename that column. So you can move these around. You can delete the steps. You can do whatever suits you best. And the whole idea is to try and make this list as small as possible. The longer this list, the more it has to do with loads of data. So if you're loading census data with millions and millions of rows and you've got 400 steps, that's a lot to do. And if you're loading the data every month, that's a lot to do every month. So absolutely, you can tailor this list, insert steps, and tweak it to your heart's content. So you can come back later on and think, actually, I found a bug. I named that column wrong. Well, I can go to my rename column, remove columns. I can change that. I can change that renamed. I've renamed a column. I can delete that step and recreate it or change the code. If you want to get into the really advanced stuff, change it up here. Hugely, hugely flexible.
Thanks, Danny. Okay, next question about qualitative data. So Libby's saying she'd be interested to hear more about how you can display qualitative data. For example, if you had something like a complex action plan across multiple themes with quarterly updates, can that be explained more accessibly? Is that appropriate for Power BI?
Yes and no. So quantitative, fantastic. Qualitative, where you've got a free text. We've just done a whole load of work on our libraries consultation. And in there was a lot of free text questions. Now, the free text ones I didn't include in my report at all. We used separate tools. We have teams who use, we use AI tools with semantic models that will analyze sentiment from the text and produce different reports or categorize it. It's not the best place for that. In Power BI, you can sort of work with qualitative stuff. You can click on more visuals and say from the app source. And here is a whole load of other like plugins. And one of them is a word cloud. You've all probably seen word clouds. So I can put that in there, dump in there your qualitative data, and it will show you people have said the word wheelie bin more than anything else. And it'd be bigger text. A little example there, what it looks like. Those are probably the most you would do. What we tend to do is our team would do that analysis. They'd group things up into their buckets about positive, negative. They're talking about improving this service. give us a number for that theme, and then would visualize those in Power BI. It does have a number of AI functions, but that's not what it's geared for.
Okay, on the topic of AI, I know a lot of councils are starting to use Copilot. I don't know if you're using Copilot in Birmingham, Danny, but Catherine's asking what is the interplay with Copilot? Is that there we go.
There we go. We have Copilot. Some of us, we are playing with it. Copilot in Power BI, Microsoft will show you the dream. They'll show you this lovely report where you type in on the web service, make me a chart showing spend by year for this, and it will magically appear, and you'll buy into that. It doesn't quite work that way. If your data model is tiny, as in 2 spreadsheets, and you've got an absolutely perfect data model, Copilot can do that, and it does it rather well. But once you start getting into what Power BI is good for, where you're pulling in all these different data sources, even if the model, we've done it for procurement, we did use it for a little while, we used AI on that, and it was working great. You can ask questions, but it's too open for interpretation. And when people are making decisions on people's lives, where it's probably pulled through the wrong bit of data, it's not quite worked. I love Copilot. I use it in everything. I use it to ask how to write measures because I haven't got a clue how to write the syntax sometimes. But in terms of Power BI, I've not been able to make it do what I want it to do yet. And that's not just me trying to save my job. If I could make my life easier by using it, I would. It's not got there yet.
Thanks, Danny. I think we'll just I think we fired lots of questions at you. I think we'll just do 2 more and then we'll bring the session to a close. So Debbie's asking, and you might have answered this already, but let's just check. Debbie's asking if she creates this using the free version, can a colleague of hers see the file if they also have the free version?
If you share the PBIX file, so when you save the file, it creates a file. Now, depending on your Windows setup, you may not see this little suffix. That's the PBIX. You know, Word documents are DOCX, XLSX. You have to share this file between yourselves unless someone else has got a better way. So, I mean, this is on our SharePoint. So our team, I'm a developer. Any of our other developers can open this and work with the file. It's the same if you wanted to share it with the manager, where you've made the report and you want your manager to see it. You put it on a SharePoint somewhere or a shared drive. They've also got Power BI installed. They open it, you open it. Big caveat to this is when it comes to development. Now, you know, Excel's great. You can open up Excel and you can all work on the same spreadsheet and it'll show you who's doing what, and it just magically merges the changes. You cannot do that with Power BI. It's one at a time. There is no collaborative when it comes to work with the PBIX files. In the platform, on the web version, yes-ish, but it's mainly designed for one person at a time. So if I open this file and Zoe and our team opens the file, makes a change and hits save, and I hit save, it's not going to merge them into one file. It's going to create a conflict. I'll see a file here with the machine name as well. So yes, you could make it and develop it, share the file with your manager. They can consume the file. Just don't let them hit save but also when you share that PBIX, they can see all this behind the scenes stuff. They can see the data in its rawest format. They can go into transform data. They can see what's in here. And if they have access to the source, they can click on the steps and see what the data looks like before you've removed everything at the end. So you think very carefully about that. But I strongly urge you, look at the pro license, £10 a person, and it will save you oodles and oodles of time.
Thank you. And I think we'll have this as our final question now. Ted is asking, is there an option to automate refreshing data? So removing the need to manually update the report daily? Absolutely.
I've produced untold numbers of reports in our various workspaces. Here's one of our workspaces. All of these reports can be automatic. So see next refresh, that report is automatically going to update. So this is our housing one. This takes data from our housing team automatically every day, every week, and gives us our latest number of housing stock that we publish publicly. You can't go to our director and say, tell me how many vacant houses we got. It's all in this report, which is updated automatically. In your premium workspace, I think you can do it in Pro as well, depending on what licenses you've got. You can hover. So there's 2 icons. See this? Same file, 2 different files, different icons. One is the visuals. That's my pittiness. Here is the data model, which someone else might have created. So in the data model, I got this little automatic refresh icon. Boop. I can now set what credentials to log on with, but I can also set the refresh. How often does it refresh? This one refreshes every week, at that time. I can add in every day, and depending what your IT set you up, you can just keep adding time. So I can say you can refresh every 5 minutes if you have that capacity and if your IT let you. So yes, you can have it automated. So our area and ward profiles on our City Observatory are updated every week with all the latest LG Inform, unemployment data, housing data. I don't touch it. I haven't touched that report in months, and it's always up to date.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danny. So yeah, as we're nearly at time, I'm going to draw the Q&A session to a close. As I mentioned before, if you've got a really burning question, I can highly recommend joining the Power BI Users Knowledge Hub group, which I've just put a link to in the chat, and also the Improvement and Performance Knowledge Hub group, which is more of a group that we use for to share information about our kind of performance management and data support that we provide, but with which is a good place actually to sign into just to see what other events you've got coming up. But there's just a lot of active users in there who are really great at supporting each other when they've got questions about things like Power BI. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I'd suggest joining. In terms of final remarks, just to remind you that I've mentioned a few times, we will circulate the recording in due course. We just need to get it subtitled and compliant with the accessibility legislation. As soon as we've done all of that, we will circulate it as soon as we can. Just to say that there'll be a very short survey that we'll send you following the session. Please do complete that, as we really value your feedback. And like I said, we're hoping to run quite a few more Power BI sessions. This is the first one. We tried to get as many people in as possible to sort of get it out there, as many people as possible to be able to see what Danny has to say, but we'll be running some more focus sessions and things like that. So we're really interested to hear what you'd find useful. So all that's left for me to say is just a huge thanks to Danny, who's very kindly given up his time just to share his knowledge with us, and just to say thank you to all of you for coming. So yeah, bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.